Hello everyone, welcome to Twilight. If you have anything to say related to the video or notice any issues, let us know in the comments. For now, enjoy the video. What if Bella betrayal by Cullens? I held my breath as I was bumped yet again as I tried to exit the airport. I was tired, grumpy, and frankly, just in a piss-poor mood. I hadn't wanted to come on this stupid trip, but Jacob had told me that he needed a break from defending me to the council for a while. I had no choice but to agree. I wasn't willing to start a war with the tribe when they had made an exception to their laws for me. I decided to head to Seattle and catch an evening flight to somewhere remote. I'd ended up in Alaska. I figured I'd head somewhere with a large population after I hunted. I had the time, so I wasn't in a hurry. New York sounded good and I hadn't been there in a while. I glanced out the windows of the small airport as I made my way to the baggage claim and waited with the rest of the passengers. I looked around cautiously as a chill went down my spine. Someone was watching me. I smelled a familiar scent, but I couldn't place it. I ignored the uneasy feeling and watched as my bag moved towards me slowly on the conveyor. My heels clicked on the floor as I moved towards it. The pencil skirt that I wore tightened around my ass and my thighs as I leaned over. My shirt pulled tight over my chest. I easily lifted the heavy duffel bag and threw it over my shoulder. I got the feeling I was being watched again, and I looked around the area once again. I shook my head and went to take another step forward, when my body froze with shock. 20 yards in front of me, standing between me and the exit, was the last group of people I ever wanted to see again. They all stood there with their golden eyes locked on me, a mixture of expressions on their faces. Excitement, sadness, and shock. Rage flooded through me, and my face changed from frustration of being in a large crowd to a look of disgust and resentment. A sound of anger rose from my chest, and I made my way towards the exit, deciding I needed to get away from this place as fast as I could. Their expressions had faltered as they noticed my cold and angry demeanor. I didn't look at them as I passed, my head held high through the middle of their group. I shook my hair out just a little to be spiteful. I knew they would smell me and know, if the sight of me hadn't clued them in already. I kept my eyes locked on the doors, trying to suppress the fury. A sudden feeling of calm passed over me. I stopped suddenly and turned to face them, rage pushing the feeling away back towards the one person who I knew could affect me like that. Don't try to manipulate my emotions. I'm not your family pet anymore, I said in a voice that was too low for the crowd to hear and resembled a hiss. They all tensed. A look of pain crossed all their faces, and Alice stepped towards me. She would have been crying if she had been able. Bella, she whispered. I glared as she said my name. Fuck you. Fuck all of you. You don't deserve to use my name anymore, I said slowly and dangerously. I went to turn when Edward stepped forward. He opened his mouth to speak, and I turned my attention to him. Don't bother wasting your time saying anything, you sorry son of a bitch. Not after last time we spoke. No, I don't think I have anything to say to you, and I certainly never want to hear anything that comes from your mouth ever again. Ever, I said just as quietly. I turned on my heel and left the family I had once loved dearly behind me, shocked down to the core. JPOV. I stood there quietly as we all watched her walk away from us. Shock was coming from every member of my family, and then the pain and regret came. Then there was guilt. I looked at my family in confusion before I tried to focus back on Bella before she disappeared. Rage, hurt, and self-loathing shot through me, and I gasped at the intensity. My family looked at me as I clutched at my chest and nearly fell to my knees. Carlisle grabbed my shoulders and lowered me to the floor. Alice knelt beside me, her eyes wide with a vision. I was shaking now, which was odd, because my body no longer felt the need to do so naturally. Esme was looking down on me with worry written in her face. I tried to speak to explain that my power had completely taken over, and I couldn't control it right now. But Carlisle looked into my eyes, and a wave of peace and calm came from him that I felt, which helped me to calm down. Oh, God, Carlisle, what have we done? This is my fault. We have to help her. I can't let her live with that. I spoke quietly. That was because of Bella, Edward asked. I nodded slowly. She won't speak to anyone, Alice said quietly. I could feel the lie roll off of her. I looked up at her, and she had a look of confusion on her face. What did you see? Emmett asked. She looked at Edward and he frowned. That doesn't make sense, he said. She shrugged. Can someone explain exactly what's going on? Rosalie said impatiently. Carlisle, she's been changed. Did you see her eyes? Esme asked. Carlisle nodded sadly. Emmett helped me to my feet and I looked over at Carlisle. I'm following her, I told him. I ignored the anger that came from both Alice and Edward. He nodded his head. I'm coming with you. Maybe she'll speak to us if we can catch her, he said, stepping away from the family. I nearly missed the sneer on my wife's face. You can't go. I don't see anything good coming from you talking to her, Alice said quickly. I shook my head as I noticed her lying again. We have to try, I told her as I turned towards the door. We're going. We'll call you later, Carlisle said quietly as we exited the airport. I immediately picked up the scent that I had caught off of her earlier. She smelled completely different now, of soy and almond milk, rather than her normal floral scent I remembered. It was a deep, sultry smell. We followed it to the outskirts of town. I could smell the blood long before I saw her. Carlisle stiffened beside me, and I felt the guilt and heartache wash over me. We continued to follow the scent after we were in the woods. A minute later we saw her cradling a body to her mouth as she drank deeply. The man had to be Emmett's size from what I could see. I heard Carlisle whisper her name and her blazing red eyes flicked up to ours. She purred deep in her throat as we watched, and I felt the lust radiating from her. I heard Carlisle groan, and I knew I wasn't alone as I fought the primal urges that were rising from within me. Stop projecting, Jasper, he said. I shook my head trying to clear my head. It's not coming from me. She's doing it. Carlisle, we need to leave. If she's projecting that strongly, she's likely to overpower my abilities, I told him as I fought a moan. He closed his eyes as I began to back away. I tried to push a wave of calm to her, but the feeling of lust was thrown back at me, and I found that I couldn't focus enough to overpower her feelings. I heard a dull thump on the ground as Bella dropped the body to the ground. She pushed it into the hole that she had dug before we got there, and an instant later all evidence of her meal was gone. I locked eyes with her, and immediately I knew we were in trouble. I heard movement behind us, and a snarl escaped her throat. I turned and saw the rest of the family rushing towards us. They stopped suddenly, and their eyes went wide with shock. They put their hands up and placed them on what looked like a hazy but almost completely clear wall. I turned back to Bella and I saw her smirking. But I didn't feel anything that would indicate that she would harm any of us, only rage and pain. Then there was regret, sadness and self-loathing, yet again. Then as she turned her eyes back to Carlisle and I, there was only blinding lust that brought both of us to our knees, moaning and shaking. I could feel my dick harden in an instant, and I knew somewhere in the back of my mind, I wasn't the only one. Bella, Carlisle moaned from next to me as he clenched his hands. Please, stop this. But it's so delicious, Carlisle. This pure feeling of want and need. I bet you feel like you're going to burst, don't you? She purred as she prowled towards us like a panther about to attack its prey. I could faintly hear the others yelling in the background, screaming at her to stop. I knew that she should stop. It was the right thing to do, but I didn't want her to. She was right. It was delicious. It was mind-numbing. All I could think was how I never wanted this feeling to end. I felt her fingers as they ghosted over my jaw. I saw as Carlisle shivered at her similar touch. She was now standing between the two of us, both of our shoulders touching her thighs. I felt another rush of desire sweep over me, and I had to resist the urge to touch her, to love her, to fight for her. I heard another voice from behind us again. It wasn't clear though. It was like I had cotton in my ears. I thought it might be Esmeralda, but I couldn't be sure. Bella, please, we're begging you. Let them go and we can talk about this. We missed you, Bella. You have to believe us. Please drop the shield. Just don't hurt Jasper or Carlisle, Esme called. I felt my body when it hit the ground. Carlisle's next to me. He was writhing with the intensity of the feelings. I felt my own hips arch as a low moan escaped my mouth, as she upped the dosage of lust again. Oh God, Carlisle moaned from next to me. Does it look like I'm hurting them, Esme? Oh, quite the opposite really. I rather think that they're enjoying themselves. Wouldn't you say? She said lightly as she knelt down next to us. She placed one hand on each of our chests, and caressed us softly. Don't you dare, Bella. You know this is wrong, Edward yelled. I heard her snarl, and the rage and pain overtook the lust. Carlisle and I were on our feet in a second, crouched before her, snarling at him. Then the lust was back and we turned towards her again and crawled towards her, our arms wrapping around her legs and waist. I felt like an animal being called back to its master, and for some reason I loved it. My foggy vision saw Carlisle rubbing his face against her hip, and I purred low in my throat. Please, Bella, he's my husband, and Jasper is Alice's husband. Please don't do this to us, Esme cried. Rosalie snarled as Esme sobbed next to her. Bella stepped away from us and we started to follow. She held up her hand, and we stayed still watching her as we panted from the feelings she was still pushing through us. I felt like I was an animal in heat, and I knew our eyes were black with lust and need. You were my family. I loved you, each and every one of you. And you left me. You left me dead and broken. I woke up each day wishing I was dead, but staying alive for Charlie. I cared enough to stay, because I wanted to protect him from the hurt and the pain of losing me completely. I knew I would heal in time, but I didn't get that time. Do you know why? Bella asked quietly. I could feel the pain overtaking again. It was so absolute and crippling that I couldn't move even though I was now free from the lust-induced psychosis. Why? What have we done to you besides trying to protect you? You know we left so that you wouldn't be harmed, Rosalie asked as Emmett held her back from the shield. But I wasn't safe. That's what you don't get. There was another vampire, just waiting for the opportunity to strike. And you gave that to her, Bella said quietly. Realization hit us all in that moment. Victoria, I whispered. She nodded without turning back to face me. Yes, Victoria. She never forgot. So she came back and she waited. She watched and one day she finally made her move. After you left I was catatonic. Nothing mattered to me anymore, except for Charlie and my mother. I knew how hurt they would be if I died. So I lived barely and tried to forget about you all, just like you wanted. Renee and Phil came up from Florida to try and convince me to move back with them. But I told them I wasn't ready yet. It was a good day for me. So I decided to cook dinner for us all. Not that I would eat anything, but I figured it would make them feel better, and they would leave me alone for a while. So I went to the grocery store to get food for everyone. When I came back she was there, my parents tied up in the living room. There was no escape, no one to help us. She taunted me for a while, telling me how she wasn't going to kill me. She had a better idea now that she actually saw how much pain I was in, because you all had left me. She bit me and watched as I burned for 3 days, and then finally died, she said quietly. Her fist clenched and I saw through the fog that venom was pooled in the eyes of my family. Rose and Emmett were radiating sadness and grief. The same was coming from Esme, Alice, and Edward. But then I felt the strong current of guilt and regret from them as well. I felt another emotion coming from Esme, shame and acknowledgement. Bella continued in her soft monotone, and I turned my attention back to her. My parents had watched the whole thing. They were terrified, of course. They had no idea what was going on. They were terrified that they were going to finally lose me, that I would die. How ironic they should have been terrified of me instead of for me. I remember Victoria laughing as I woke from the burning. The first thing I smelled was their blood. The first thing I heard was their hearts beating, Bella said before pausing. She turned to look at Carlisle and I. We all knew what had happened next. She didn't need to say anything. Carlisle stepped forward and cupped her cheek in his hand. Bella, I am so sorry. If I had realized, he said quietly but trailed off. I knew when she opened her eyes and they relayed so much pain and self-hatred. I knew she would continue with her story, just so we would all know what we had done to her, the pain she had to suffer because of our stupidity. I knew now that we deserved whatever she threw our way, all of us. Carlisle slid his arms around her shoulders and pulled her into him. She exhaled before she continued in that voice that made her voice sound almost robotic, while she curled deeper into Carlisle's embrace. I tried to fight the instinct. I tried so hard, but she had pushed Phil towards me before I could even think of anything but the thirst burning in my throat. I can still hear their screams as I drained him right before their eyes. Then I moved on to my mother. I can still remember my father begging me to stop, but I couldn't. When I turned to him, I could feel the love and acceptance coming from him. Even though he was terrified, he still loved me. I still couldn't stop myself as I pulled him to me. He told me he loved me as he died in my arms, because of me. When the bloodlust finally stopped, I turned my attention back to Victoria. I saw what I had done to my family. I snapped, and before she could stop me, I was on top of her. She fought, but my newborn strength was more than she could handle. I killed her, then I set the house on fire, so no one would know what happened. So I guess you were right, Edward. We are monsters, Bella finished quietly as she turned back to face the rest of the family, pulling herself away from Carlisle. They were sobbing quietly as they listened to her story. I couldn't feel them anymore. I was too overwhelmed with Bella's crippling agony. Bella, I am so sorry that we put you through that. If we had known, Esme said. Bella's shoulders stiffened. 3 of you did. Edward and Alice knew to some extent. I can feel what you feel. Their guilt is overwhelming. And you, Esme, the shame you're feeling is crushing. But the fact that you're not surprised at what I'm telling you gives you away. What did you know? Have you been hiding things from Carlisle and your family to protect 2 of them? I think you have. So now, since you took something from me, I'm going to take something from you. We'll all suffer eternity together. How does that sound? Bella said as she locked her focus back onto me and Carlisle. Alice's eyes went white as a vision flashed before her eyes. Bella grinned down at us as she waited for it to pass. Bella, please, no, Alice yelled as they all fought against the barrier surrounding us. Bella, please don't do this to them. To Alice and Esme, think about this. They don't deserve this, Edward yelled. Bella shrugged. Bella, Carlisle said sadly. She looked over at him and her eyes softened. I'm sorry, she whispered to Carlisle and I as she began projecting on us again. The lust was overwhelming as it hit us both again, and we sank back to the ground writhing in ecstasy. Carlisle and I were both panting as our bodies moved on their own, flexing and arching as wave after wave of intense pleasure coursed through us both. It was the most exquisite feeling. The fire was running through every vein and was nearly painful. My eyesight blurred as I felt the end approaching. Bella, Carlisle whimpered as he moved towards her. His eyes were as glazed over in lust as mine were. Please, touch yourself, Carlisle. I want to see you bring yourself to the edge. Both of you, she said as she planted a light kiss on both of our lips. The smell and the taste of human blood on her lips sent us over the edge. We both jumped up and trapped her between us. Fuck Bella, I'm begging you. Please, please, I whimpered. Another wave washed over us, and we both started grinding our hard dicks into her body. Our mouths moved over her neck and chest. A moan escaped her, and we were both lost in the rapture that flooded us as we both came. Color exploded behind my eyes, and my long moan of release mixed with Carlisle's. The three of us were quivering in the aftermath as we collapsed to the ground. The lust was subsiding and being replaced by a feeling of contentment, which then turned to an absolute and awe-inspiring feeling of love. She lowered us both to the ground next to her and stood. I tried to get up, but the feeling of such intense emotion had me stuck in the place I was. Both Carlisle and I were just staring up at her, our eyes half-lidded, and he kept repeating her name over and over. My mind was soaring and I couldn't focus. I felt like I was home. Jasper, I heard Alice yell, but I couldn't take my eyes off of Bella. We both tried to reach for her, but she stepped away. Well, this has been fun, but I think it's time for me to be going, she said as she extended the shield to wrap around the rest of the family as she stepped out of it. The feelings of contentment and love vanished and I felt empty. I needed them back. I needed them more than I needed blood to survive. I needed Bella back. I rushed to the edge of the shield as Carlisle began calling her name. He sounded pained and I knew he felt the same way. We were both clawing at the shield trying to get to her. Please, Bella, don't, I said to her as she began walking backwards. She was leaving. No, Bella, you can't leave. Please, Carlisle murmured from beside me. I felt someone trying to approach us from behind. I turned and growled low in my throat, and the family stepped back. I couldn't care less. I had this deep sense of longing that was rising. I needed her back. Carlisle and I both needed her back. I couldn't live with that feeling that was taking over me. I wouldn't survive. All I felt was pain as I watched her walk away. Finally, the shield broke and I was following her scent through the woods, as if the fires of hell were on my trail. I could hear a scream of pain register in my thoughts, but I couldn't stop. I had to get to her, and I wouldn't stop until I found her. Please tell me you didn't know, I said as I threw another lamp through the wall at the Denali's home. Carmen and Elazar were standing next to Jasper as he shook in his own silent fury. They had sent the rest of the family out to hunt when we had arrived. Edward, Alice, Esme, Rosalie, and Emmett sat on the couch in Levassiet. My head dropped, and the anger seemed to flow out of me as quickly as it had hit. After we had lost Bella's scent we had come here, and Esme had tried to comfort me. I've never lost my temper as quickly as I did then. Please tell me that you did not betray the family in such a way. Carlisle, you have to understand, it was only one of the possibilities that I saw and discussed with Edward and Esme. We were never sure of what was going to happen to her, Alice said as her eyes filled with venom, and she gave me a look that would usually have me believing whatever she was saying. I heard Jasper's low warning growl from behind me. Lies, nothing but lies, Jasper said harshly as he stepped forward. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I can feel the guilt pouring off of you three. Jasper, Esme pleaded. She stopped as a snarl ripped from his throat. Did you know Esme? Husband to wife, just tell me the truth, I said quietly. Esme looked to the ground. I could see Alice and Edward's nervous glances towards her. Esme's shoulders began to shake. Esme, please. Fine, if you want the truth then fine, I knew. We all three did, Esme spat as she surged to her feet. Her face was no longer sorrowful or beautiful. Rage had twisted her features into a look I'd never seen before. Jasper and I stared at her in shock. Why? I heard Carmen ask from behind me. Esme fisted her hands in her hair and let out a wail before straightening herself out and glaring at me. Why not? Bella was nothing but a nuisance. I loved her, yes. But as soon as Alice told me the facts about what would happen if she stayed around, then I knew I had to help get us away from her, Emmett said. I shook my head sadly and turned towards Alice. I couldn't handle this woman who was supposed to be my loving wife, yet had transformed into this cold and vindictive woman, until I figured out what the hell had happened. What did you tell her? I asked. Alice stood and turned to look out the window. She stood there for a few minutes just staring as she searched for the answers in her mind. Finally she turned to face us. It's hard to explain why we did what we did. The easiest way to say it is that Emmett and I aren't your mates. Bella is meant to be with one of you. I just can't see which one, she told us. Emmett hissed and stepped towards her, but a low growl from Jasper kept her in her place. Alice shook her head before continuing. You see, when I met Jasper and led us to you, I knew that he and I weren't mates. I also knew as soon as I started seeing Carlisle and Emmett that they were not meant to be together forever. I would get flashes of this woman, but I couldn't see her face. When Bella came into the picture, the visions got stronger and more frequent. I assumed she was the woman I was seeing. I would see her in different scenarios with each of you, but it was never definite who she was with. That was the one thing my visions never told me. So what, you just tossed her to the side, so that you two could keep up your happy charade with the two of us? Jasper asked. He stepped up to my side, and I placed my hand on his shoulder to try and calm him. Alice just smiled sadly and shook her head. You don't get it. Normally when a vampire meets their mate, the effect is instant. With Bella, it is completely different. She has a way of shielding her instincts and her mind and just about everything about herself. She always has. Now, she's gained the ability to project all that outward. I'm still having trouble seeing her. That's why I couldn't see who she's supposed to be with. That's also why the person she's meant to be with doesn't realize it. The mating instinct isn't one way, it's two souls trying to connect. If one soul is blocked, then neither will react. So in order to figure it, help and keep the family safe. I lied, Alice said. You what? Edward growled suddenly. I looked at him and saw him glaring at Alice as he stood next to Emmett. Alice shrugged and ignored him. You mean to tell me that the visions and the thoughts you had and have been having are false? Of course, Alice told him as she smiled sweetly. I knew you would never give up your singer without a fight. I had too many visions on you killing her to believe that she was your mate. With Emmett, it was different. I saw visions of her flying into a jealous rage and killing Bella when no one was around. I knew that I couldn't convince either of you one-on-one. So I used your fears and my visions to convince you to get each other away from her. She's my best friend, Edward. She may be hurting now because of how things happened, but at least she and the family are still safe and sound. What do you mean safe and sound? I asked, ignoring Emmett and Edward's indignant protests. I mean that of all the other scenarios I saw, the one that happened was the only one that didn't result in the death of everyone involved. That goes to say Bella and her family as well as ours. With every other vision, we were all destroyed by the Volturi or by an army that Victoria would have created. I can't say for sure because I can't see them, but the wolves probably would have been destroyed as well, Alice said. I sighed and ran a hand through my disheveled hair. So what you're saying is that everything you did was to protect everyone involved, not to rip the family apart, even if it means you and Jasper aren't together? I asked quietly. Alice nodded. I've already seen who my mate is. Everything will be okay now. I'm just sorry that things had to happen the way they did. I really felt it was the best way. You will never know how hard it was to go through with my plan, knowing that Bella would have to suffer the way she did, Alice said. I could see the venom pooling in her eyes. I turned to Jasper and he nodded. She's not lying. Anymore at least, he said with a smirk in Alice's direction. She gave him a watery smile. So what now? Rosalie asked from her seat next to Emmett. Emmett grinned broadly. Well, now that we know all of the details, I would say we go and find my baby sister, he said as he stood. He moved to Alice and scooped her up in his arms. Thanks for saving us all. I owe you one. Anytime, Emmett, Alice said as she burst into laughter. I shook my head and moved to sit down. I felt exhausted. Are you okay, Carlisle? Jasper asked me. I chuckled darkly. I miss sleeping, I mumbled. The room burst into laughter around me. I looked up confused when I noticed two distinct voices missing. They left, Eleazar said from behind me. I shook my head and lowered my head into my hands. My first child and my wife had disappeared from the room. I honestly couldn't tell if I was relieved or heartbroken at their sudden departure. I felt Eleazar's hand on my shoulder. It will all work out, old friend. I wouldn't worry about it too much just yet. Thank you. I'm sorry about your wall, I said quietly. Eleazar chuckled softly. I looked up as Jasper spoke. Do you know where Bella was headed? He asked. Alice shrugged. It's not for sure. I've had a few flashes but nothing definite, she told us. I think we should hunt and then get started on looking for her, Rosalie said. We all looked at her in shock. Rose, Emmett said quietly. She smiled softly. I didn't want her to lose out on her humanity, but I guess since she's already one of us, then I have no choice but to like her. That's all, she stated quietly as she moved towards the door leading outside. Emmett scooped her up and they disappeared in the next instant. So we're not going to be able to hunt to the north. I'm not sure I ever want to see what they get up to ever again. And I do mean ever, Jasper said as he smirked my way. I smiled and shook my head. We all had accidentally found out exactly what Rose and Emmett did when they went hunting. I shook my head lightly from the thought. Okay, so we'll head to the east, and we'll make up a game plan as we go. Carmen and Eleazar, thank you so much for your hospitality. I will pay for any damages. I am so sorry that we brought this into your home, I said as I turned and said to say my farewells to my longtime friends. Always a pleasure, Carmen said cheekily as she hugged me tightly. And don't worry about the wall. It was worth it to see you lose your temper. I would have to agree with her. Whatever this Bella did to you and Jasper out in those woods must have had quite an effect, Eleazar said with a grin as he shook my hand. I would have blushed if I could have, and Jasper coughed lightly and shuffled on his feet. Alice's laughter filled the room as she danced around us and grabbed both of our hands. I'll have to tell you the story one day when they're not around. Carmen, I think you might find it highly arousing, Alice told the other woman with a naughty little smirk on her face. Carmen eyeballed me and Jasper as Eleazar laughed. Jasper and I quickly made our getaway, as Alice's tinkling laughter followed behind us into the night. BPOV. I funneled through the emotions of the crowd surrounding me, as I tried to push out the feelings of guilt that I felt over what had happened. Carlisle and Jasper kept popping into my mind. The two Cullens that I respected the most, and I just hurt them more than they deserved. I swayed my hips as I made my way through the nightclub. I could smell the bodies around me as they moved to the music. Their blood was pumping quickly through their veins, as the alcohol tinged it with a bitter sweetness that I loved. I hummed low in my throat as I searched for my meal. I was very particular in who I chose though. I may have fed from humans, but my own moral compass that had survived from my human life would not allow me to feed from an innocent. I found what I was looking for quickly in a group of men harassing two younger women toward the darker corner of the club. I stopped a few feet from them, making sure I was at an angle so the women would not be able to easily recognize me if anyone just so happened to come asking questions, and I pushed a small wave of boredom their way, and then drew their attention with a wave of desire. They quickly left the two women alone, and proceeded to follow me as I smiled over my shoulder at them. I kept their curiosity fulfilled as we exited the crowded club and into an alley a few blocks away. As soon as they rounded the corner into the darkness, I pounced. An hour later, I was walking through the city when I looked up into the city skyline, and I grinned. I loved New York, but I wouldn't be here long. I thought about how my life was going to change. I knew that the Cullens wouldn't just forget that they had seen me. Carlisle and Jasper would be particularly eager. I knew Jasper could hold off the feelings temporarily, but sooner or later they would need me to fulfill the desires again. The people I had used my gift on always did. This time had felt different though. It felt deeper and more connected. Even now I felt a pull coming from somewhere deep inside. It was still very faint, but it was there. It was also an unknown factor, so it was something I ignored for now. As the traffic picked up, I sighed and made my way toward my hotel. The sun would be coming up soon, and it wouldn't do for me to be stuck somewhere I couldn't easily hide. I was going to go back and zone out in front of the television for the day. Maybe hit the gym and do some swimming just for the hell of it. After all, physical activities always proved to keep my mind off of things. Maybe I had finally found some luck in my afterlife. I sure as hell didn't think so. I was burning. That's the only way I could describe this feeling that was consuming me. I felt like my skin was crawling. The itch felt like it was deep inside my body. I couldn't stop myself from trying to gouge marks down my arms, just to get it to stop. The tightness in my chest was becoming more painful, and even though I didn't need to breath, I felt myself gasping for air. I groaned as I rocked back and forth, trying to think of anything but the pain consuming me. "What the hell is this?" Rosalie asked Emmett as they pulled Carlisle in the front door. He wasn't faring much better than I was. As they lowered him to the floor, he crawled over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder. The sensation lessened, but only slightly enough for him to speak. "Bella," he said quietly. Rosalie looked at us in shock. She lowered herself down on her knees next to us. "What do you mean, Carlisle?" she asked. You need to find her. Whatever she did to us in the clearing. It's like a human being on heroin or methadone. You need to find her, he said as he started hyperventilating. They're withdrawing, Emmett said quietly from behind her. She turned to look at him. Are you fucking serious? She said harshly. He nodded. She growled and clenched her fist. Emmett, it's been 6 months. If we haven't found her by now, then it's likely we won't. We have to try. We can't leave them like this. Jasper has been able to hold it off because he's an empath too. But now that it's become too much for him, they're both going to suffer. I want you stay here and protect them. Try and get them to drink. I'll be back as soon as I can, Emmett said before pulling her to him and kissing her deeply. My eyes filled with tears at the sight. They were suffering because of us, and we couldn't even explain exactly what was going on. I'm sorry, I whispered. They pulled away and looked to Carlisle and me. Your family. You have nothing to be sorry for, Emmett said before standing and heading out the door. Be careful, Emmett. Call me later, Rosalie said as she lifted me up and moved me to the couch. I wish I could help you guys. I can't believe this. Where is Alice when you fucking need her? Rosalie whispered bleakly to herself as she walked over to Carlisle and picked him up gently. She sat him gently on the other end of the couch. I can't help but to agree with you on that one, Carlisle said softly as his teeth began to chatter. I shut my eyes and tried to block out the noise. It seemed too human. I still didn't understand exactly what was going on. We were both dead, yet our bodies were acting completely human. Empath. As I ran away from the house where my family was suffering, a million different thoughts crossed my mind. I was a vampire, and I still couldn't wrap my mind around what was happening. I had a few ideas, and since Alice wasn't answering anyone's phone calls, I was just going to have to wing it. My first idea was to head back to Forks and see what the hell has been going on there since we left. I needed to talk to the wolves and see if they'd seen or heard from Bella since her change. I doubted it, but it was worth a shot. It took me a little less than a day to make my way to Forks. I stopped by the old house quickly to shower after my last meal, before making my way to the treaty line. I paced back and forth for hours hoping that I would get their attention. I needed them to hurry, but even I knew better than to try and enter their territory without warning. I finally caught a scent on the wind and prepared myself. I was worried since I didn't know how this visit would turn out. What is your business here? The man said as he stepped into the clearing with a sneer on his face. I'm not here to cause any harm, but there's a situation and I needed to speak to you, I told him. I'm Emmett. Sam, now tell me what you want before I decide that you're wasting my time, he said harshly. I sighed. Have you heard from Bella? I asked. His sneer vanished and shock replaced it. You've seen her? He asked. I nodded slowly. About 6 months back we ran into her in Alaska. She used her powers on 2 of the family, and now they're having a severe reaction. It looks like withdrawing for a human, which for us should be fucking impossible. I need to find her before I lose my father and my brother, I told him. He shook his head. We told her to leave about the same time you say you met her again. She was becoming angry and volatile. We couldn't take the chance of her attacking our tribe. We did our best to make her a part of our family after what happened, but she's never let go of that anger towards your family, or herself. Jacob said he talked to her a few days ago. She mentioned Mardi Gras and then something about Texas. She never really trusts anyone to know all of her plans though, so it's hard to say, Sam told me. Could I please speak to Jacob? If she's going to Texas, then I need to try and catch her before she gets there. She won't make it out alive if she gets over the border, I told him. I remembered Jasper's stories of the South. He told me all about Maria and her sick mind. I couldn't let something happen to Bella now that I could do something about it. Follow me, Sam said as he turned and started back towards the reservation. He phased and I quickly followed him, hoping that Jacob would be able to help me pin down her location. BPOV. I sang softly to myself as I walked down the streets of the French Quarter. It wasn't time for Mardi Gras yet, but there were still a few people around to fuck with. I was trying to occupy my time so I would quit thinking about that pull that was still inside me. I didn't want to follow it. I just wanted to be left alone. I sent out a wave of humor at a group of young girls passing me, and smiled as their laughter that filled the air. I sighed sadly as I turned down a side street and stopped. I caught the scent of 3 vampires ahead of me and 2 perched on the fire escape above me. Well fuck, I said to myself. The jackass in the middle must have been their leader because he laughed and stepped towards me. Not yet, but we've been watching you all night hoping for a chance, you pretty little bitch, he said as he grinned. I rolled my eyes. Yay for me, I said blankly. Can I go now? Who do you think you are, you little cunt? Said one of the vampires from above me. I looked up at him and cocked my eyebrow. You really want to find out? I asked. He jumped down and landed right in front of me. "There's no way you could take on 5 of us," he said with a smirk. I smiled sweetly. "Sweetheart, that's child's play for me," I told him. I threw out my shide, knocking him away from me and into the leader, before wrapping it around the alley, so that they couldn't run. They may have started this fight, but I was certainly going to end it. The 5 of them snarled at me, preparing for the attack. I yawned and pushed out a slow wave of exhaustion. They wavered briefly and I smirked. "What are you doing?" the leader asked. I slowly replaced the exhaustion with fear before upping the dose. The other vampire on the fire escape fell to the alley floor, and I laughed. I walked up to the leader and pulled him up by his collar. His eyes were nearly rolling in desperation, and I could see the venom foaming in his mouth. "Who's the bitch now?" I asked before ripping his head from his shoulders. 10 minutes later, I was exiting the alley, wiping the dust from my hands, when I bumped into someone hard enough to knock me down. I looked up and I groaned. "Hey there, little sis. Long time no see," Emmett said as he reached out a hand to help me up. I took it and glared at him. "I know that you know why I'm here." Yay, I do," I said sadly as I walked down the street with him. "Well, are you going to play nice or do I have to get mean like those last guys you were talking to?" Impressive, by the way. I would have been all over that one guy for calling you a cunt. But I figured you could judo chop those bastard by yourself, Emmett said before he continued chattering on. I placed my fingers to my temples and rubbed as if I had a headache. "Fuck my life," I said. Emmett smiled at me and continued rambling about nothing. "Well, there goes my peace and quiet." The end.